opening their minds up to what it means to really be alive, and it makes me angry.
That's good.
So I'm gonna write the book.
What's the title of this book? Are you sharing that yet or not?
Yeah, The Law of the Sublime.
So it's about how we can think differently, or how we can open our minds to possibilities.
Yeah, it's to reanimate your soul, so you feel excited about things. So you feel like, when you were a child, you were curious about so many things. You were open to so many experiences. Things were constantly wowing you. And then you become blasé, you become cynical. You don't want new experiences because they kind of mess with familiar patterns. And then your life kind of closes and closes and closes. And the sublime is opening your mind up as far as possible, as wide as possible. And opening your mind and your spirit like that makes you more creative, makes you more energized, makes you a better human being, etc. And so I have to write a book with a sense of purpose. I don't write books for money. I swear on the Bible, I do not write books for money. The money comes in and I'm very happy, comfortable. But I don't write going, what's the most marketable book I can do next? It's like, what do I need to express in this moment?
Yeah. What does sublime mean? What is the definition?
Well, you really want to get into the weeds there? It comes from the Latin word sublimen, and there's several meanings of it, but the one that I like is the limen is what's called a threshold. It's like a door that leads from one place to another, right? And sub means right up to. So sublime is right up to the limit. And the way I interpret it is that door is death itself. On the other side is death. And so I draw I have a metaphor it'll be through in the book and on the cover of a kind of a circle, right? And our brains tend to work in these kind of conventional patterns, our minds, our thoughts, etc., right? And that circle is the limits that we will not go past. We will not think thoughts beyond that.
We'll stay in the circle.
Yeah.
We won't go beyond it.
Right. Just beyond it is this region of the sublime. And it goes in very different arrows. And each arrow is a chapter. But the main arrow is death itself. And when you go up to that door and you peer on the other side, you see something that's going to shake you up. It's going to transform you like it transformed me, right? You're going to realize how short your life is, how weird it is to be alive, the possibilities of what it means to actually die. Near-death experiences are pretty awesome, amazing things. People have had near-death experiences and they've been completely enlightened by them, right? And so that's the ultimate sublime experience, is going up to that threshold of death itself. But there are other experiences that I'm going to be talking about as well.
I'm excited about that. That'll be fun. That'll be fun. What about I think you mentioned in the laws of human nature, the first one, confront your dark side. What about the one you're thinking about more now that connects to you?
Well, obviously, the chapter on death. Not so much now, but right after my stroke, because that was the last chapter, chapter 18. I finished it pretty much in May of 2018. And I poured a lot of energy into it because I kind of think a lot about mortality, etc. And I really thought, and I
Julie whispers.
put a lot into it. And then 2.5 months later, it happens.
After the book came out.
After I finished writing.
After you finished writing, the book hadn't come out yet, Josh.
Like, what is the irony there? The gods are somehow messing with me, right?
Yeah.
Because the fact that the stroke happened was like a series of chains of events that were pretty unlikely. So it was almost like fated to happen, right? And so I had to reassess. All right, why you wrote that? Is that really true? Is it really true that it alters how we look at other people? Yeah, it does. You were true.
Oh, hello.
What happened was,
How's your weekend?
from an intellectual position, and the experience was not intellectual, it was very real. So when I had my stroke and I was in the hospital in the first days, I had this feeling in my stomach of almost like my bones melting, but they were soft, that the inside of my body was soft. And so I later felt that is the feeling of death. that's still in me, this feeling of softness. So death was no longer an idea. It was in my gut. It was in my viscera. It was a feeling. And so, I had to think about that. And I actually did write that death is a feeling. It's not an idea. But here it was brought to me in an experiential way.
Wow. I think that experience you had is going to be very powerful for the next book.
I hope so.
Being able to share your experience of being on the brink of death.
Yeah, I'll tell you what,
Wow.
I'm going to mention this in the book, is I had planned on writing this book, The Sublime, 14 years ago. It was to be the book I wrote after the war book. And then I got sidelined in different projects. And I'd always had the idea when I did this that I was going to go
Who had a stroke? Oh, um,
I was going to go
Robert,
Antarctica.
author Robert Greene.
I was going to go paragliding. I was going to take boats in this area. I was going
I'm sorry your weekend was crappy.
to live my book. And now I can't do anything. I can't do nothing. I can barely even go outside the house. So what do I have to do?
Strokes are one of like my
My head. I have to imagine all of it.
worst
And I think it's a
fear.
very good thing, because if I had been able to just go around and have all these adventures,
I don't want to think about it too much because I
just uses money.
don't want to attract what I'm fearing.
Go to Antarctica, But everyone who's reading the books can be in my position, more or less. You don't have the money or the power to do all these things, but it's in your head. It's how you think about it. So it's altered how I'm going to write the book and how I think about the reader.
I think imagination's got to be one of the most powerful things we can have, or the power of our imagination. What did Einstein say about imagination? Something that's like more powerful than knowledge or something like that. But it's what you were talking about earlier about being able to alchemize something, having an idea that then we can transmute into real life and creation. And I think it's hard to create something meaningful without having a meaningful
God damn it,
imagination.
this fucking brush.
It brings you back to being a curious mind from childhood, and being able to express yourself and be curious.
Well, I look at it this way. We're all going through a very difficult time now. A lot of people out there are really suffering. The circumstances are very harsh, their work, etc. And the tendency is that you don't imagine what else it could be, what the future could be, what you could be doing with your life. So the lack of imagination is really holding you back. So the idea that I want to plant in people's brain with my next book and in general is things don't have to be the way they are. Because you're in this situation in the present doesn't mean it has to be that way in 2 months or a year from now. There are other possibilities. Try and imagine a different path for your life in a year, or what that could be like. Try and imagine a different relationship you can be in if you're stuck in something. But don't keep in this small little circle of thought. So imagination is extremely powerful and extremely important.
You mentioned Martin Luther King as someone you're really inspired by from the past. Who are the top 2 people that you've researched or written about in any of your books that you really connect with the most as an inspirational leader from the past or a human being?
Well, this person is a little bit more on the devilish side, because I have to, not act like I'm this Mother Teresa here. And that would be Machiavelli. Machiavelli was the inspiration for the 48 Laws I have always loved.
Machiavelli.
He's such a realist. He explains this is not how life should be. This is how life is. This is how people are. This is what the world is like. And when I was 16, when I first read The Prince, wow, I didn't really understand the book. I go, wow, this is powerful. This is really talking to me. This is really saying what it's like with my friends in high school, etc. I could relate to his honesty, because so many people are so dishonest. And I love him because he's a man of the Renaissance. People don't understand this about him. He wrote a hardcore book like The Prince, but he also wrote much more intellectual book like The Discourses. He also wrote one of the wickedest plays, comedies ever written in the history of theater. A play so sacrilegious that it shocked everyone at the time. And it was a very funny play called Mandragola. He was like a poet. He was a great seducer of women, even though he was physically ugly. He was like a really weird guy. He was interesting, and I loved his stories, right? So he'd be one. And the other one would be from masters, Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, these are from the same period. In fact, they probably crossed each other's path. Um, but da Vinci, he was like not human. He thought on a level that was so superior, that was so almost godlike, that it fascinated me. You know, there's a theme that I have in my new book. People who are so far ahead of their time, it's uncanny. And I have examples in history of this. People who are 1,500 years ahead of their time. How can that be? Is it just coincidence or what is it? And I'm fascinated by it. Well, he was doing drawings of military tanks, of flying planes, of all kinds of elaborate technological devices that some have never even been invented. You know, and where did this come from? He was also like one of the first people in history who observed nature just for itself. He loved like plants and flowers and animals without thinking about God or religion. He was one of the first animal lovers in history. I'm an animal lover, right? I love any kind of it.
You got cats, right?
I have cats, but I love dogs.
Two
I love
cats,
horses.
right?
I have two cats.
Yeah.
I love horses. I love dogs. I love them all. He, and no, people were so cruel to animals.
Alpacas too.
Nobody had pets like that.
The stray animals. And they
Cats
kick
were
on
just
them.
there to kill rats, etc. He would go in the marketplace in Florence with birds were being sold. He would buy them and open the cage and let them fly away. He had great empathy for other animals, creatures, who the church said didn't have a soul, but he believed that animals had souls, and he was the first person really. So I'm obsessed with people like that who are so far ahead of their time. He'd be the second guy.
Wow. Is there a woman from the past that you really
Cleopatra.
Cleopatra? Why?
Well, because I wrote a book about seduction.
Yeah.
And, I'm obviously, I have a side to me that's very into seduction. I wouldn't have written the book, and in my 20s, I was kind of a player, and it's hard to believe now, but I was.
Yeah.
I was a bit of a rake. And so, and Cleopatra was kind of like almost my ideal in a way when I read about, haven't met her, obviously. But she was very smart. She was quite intellectual. I've always been very attracted to very smart women, right? Um, she was very well read. She had the Library of Alexandria there. She read all the Greek classics. She was a lot smarter than the men around her. She was a lot smarter than Mark Antony. I wouldn't say she was smarter than Julius Caesar, but she was his equal. And she was an insanely good seductress. She was very theatrical. She knew how to create these insane spectacles. And what man wouldn't be impressed by that? She knew that Mark Antony was like this kind of raging sensualist. So she seduces him by creating this insanely decadent barge that floats down the Nile River with all these weird animals on it, and people fanning you with giant things and all gold and everything. Mark Antony goes on a tour of all the cities on the Nile on this barge, and he was totally seduced. She was like constantly putting on this theater. And believe it or not, she supposedly wasn't that beautiful. We don't have any images from her, but descriptions said that she had a bit of a nose, etc. But her energy was really interesting. So that would probably be the woman that you chose.
What do you think is the greatest skill or a couple skills that any 20 to 30-year-old kind of in their 20s should be learning how to master today, from the skills of psychology, the skills of human nature, the skills of understanding people? Which skill should that be?
The best thing is to be able to get inside the minds of other people.
Ooh, there we
If
go.
you develop that skill, the sky's the limit. Nothing will ever stop you. Because people are like a mystery. They wear a mask, and you don't have any idea what they're thinking. And I have this metaphor in Human Nature, which I never wrote, but imagine a device was created in which some app, then you can know the thoughts and feelings of the other person. Do you know the power you would have? It'd be insane. Okay, I can't give you such an app. I can't invent that. But you can develop half of that power by becoming somewhat of insane empathy. And it's not easy, and not everybody's born the same way. but it begins with one very simple step. And that is, normally you go around more interested in your own thoughts and ideas. You're thinking about your boss, you're thinking about your girlfriend or boyfriend, you're thinking about this person who said this, that, or the other. You're locked in your head. It's like a record, like in the old vinyl days, going around and round and round, the same grooves, right? And even when you're sitting there talking with someone on a date or something, you're thinking about yourself. You're still in there, right? Because you find yourself more interesting than the other person. And it's very human. I'm not judging you. But inevitably, you think your own dramas, your own ideas, your own problems are essentially more interesting than the other person. So if that's your starting position, you're naturally going to be more absorbed in yourself. To switch it around, and you tell yourself, the other person is more interesting than me. Their life, their thoughts, their ideas is like an undiscovered world. It's like going to Tahiti or something and visiting another culture. They have experiences you've never had. They have a world that's not your world. It's fascinating. Why do people love movies? They love movies because they get to go inside other people's characters.
Yeah.
And they get to vicariously live in them. It's voyeurism. You can have that in everyday life if you switch that thing where you're more interested in other people. And so when you listen to them, you're not listening with the idea of, do they like me? Are they thinking about me? What does that have to do with me? I'm sorry, using that voice. Blah, 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 kind of a whiny voice. What's it about me, me? Thinking, just in a Zen way, absorb yourself in their words and their energy and think about what they're saying. What's the subtext behind them? What's the body language revealing? What is it that motivates them? What is their inner life like? I can't get inside Lewis Howe's thoughts. It's impossible. But I can get inside your moods and emotions because we humans are very susceptible to the moods of other people. We can feel them. So I can start to, if I'm open enough, I can understand the tone in your voice. I can understand the subtext of what you're saying, and I can pick up the emotion behind it and what you're intending. And once I do that, well, then if someone says something, I don't have to take it personally because now I understand that it probably comes from other things that have nothing to do with me. Or I want to persuade them to help me on a project. Well, now I know what their world is like, what their spirit is, what their problems are. I'm going to mold what I'm saying to get them interested in my idea. Doors open up to you, left, right, and center. The whole universe opens up to you once you're able to put yourself in the mindset and the point of view of other people, enter their spirit. That's the single greatest step you can have. So you're about to start your first job. You're all insecure and you're all worried about you and what people think about you. Try and it's not easy, it's not natural. Try and make that switch. And don't think about yourself and try and figure out what is your boss like? What is he or she? What is motivating them? What are their insecurities? What are their doubts? What is this person feeling that? And suddenly you're going to navigate this social environment in a much different level.
I love this. This is powerful, I think. So to get in the minds of other people would be the greatest skill.
By far.
And the way to do that, I'm hearing you say, is through empathy, through asking interesting questions, through listening.
No, it's taking this one step, which is other people are more interesting than me. I love going to see movies. That other person is like Hannibal Lecter. I'm sorry, that's not a good choice.
Sure.
Could be, but or they're like this other character in some other movie. I don't know. Choose whichever one you want, right? They're
Beetlejuice. There you go.
Okay. Wow, that was a long time ago.
Yeah. Just thinking of a fascinating character.
They're like that. They have built stories. They have drama, right? Their childhood was probably weird. They come from a culture, from a city, from a background that's not your city or background, and to try and understand it. Now, some people are harder to do that with than others. There are people out there who are like just total assholes. You don't really want to have to get into their world, right? You feel like you're getting yourself taking a shower of mud or something, or excrement, or whatever. You don't want to get into their world. But even then, it pays. If you've got a psychotic boss, it pays to get inside their mind so that you don't take things personally, so you can understand where they come from. So even with horrible people, being able to understand who they are will prevent you from taking everything personally.
So having the understanding that other people are more interesting than me, having that framework in your mind allows you to look at them differently.
Or as interesting.
Or
If
as
they have
interesting.
stories to tell. They have a life that's fascinating. They're like a character in the movie. I want to understand it.
And asking questions allows you to understand it.
And you have to be careful with questions because if you're so obvious, if you're going,
Tell me about this.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you love your mother? Did your father?
It's like, yeah, why you asking me this? Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we get to know them without being intrusive?
Well, it's an art. So, you know, people love to talk about their childhood, right?
And their successes and yeah.
Yeah. But I found like childhood is the main thing. Everyone has this kind of emotional attachment to their experiences as a child, to where they grew up, to their parents, to their family, to their earliest friends. It's got all sorts of emotions surrounding it that are very potent and uncontrollable. So a very kind of slip-in question about someone's childhood, and then asking a few leading questions and letting them do the talking. So if you're peppering them with questions, you look like a lawyer or someone who's
or someone like me who just interviews people for a living.
Right. So you want them to do 90%. You can't. 90% of it's obvious what you're doing. 80% are people love to talk, right? If they do 70% of the talking, they're not even aware that they're doing that. But you're letting them talk, you're letting them be the star. But you find a foothold into what excites them, and you get them to talk and open up about their childhood, and then occasionally a question, and then occasionally you go into your own life to sort of show, oh yeah, you had that. I have something very kind of similar. Mirroring people is a slightly manipulative trick. I don't doubt that, and I talk about that in seduction, but it's very powerful. They start telling you things about their childhood that are powerful. You go, yeah, I had something very similar, and we probably have had something similar.
Yeah.
That's a really potent way of connecting to people. But you've got to be subtle. It's an art to getting people to talk and open up, to finding that thing that lights their face up, that gets them excited, you know?
Yeah, I think the book Influenced by Cialdini, I don't know if you studied that book, but just likability allows you to, is one of his main, I think it's 7 or 8 keys of influence, but he talks about likability. And the more someone can see that they like you through mirroring or through, we have one thing in common, makes them like you more. So finding that commonality, social proof, there's like a bunch of other things. I can't remember all 7 of them, but yeah, likability is one of the biggest things. It's one of the reasons why I'm just always trying to have fun, just be playful and kind of ease the moment for people so they can feel like, oh, this is relaxing and fun and playful.
Well, I must admit that's why you're a good interviewer. And I know that because I've had many bad interviewers who are kind of tense and nervous and defensive, and they're insecure, right? And they make you feel that way. And but you have an energy that kind of brings out that part of, at least for me,
that's good. Yeah.
That likes to yammer.
How does someone not be insecure? An interviewer, someone trying to get a job when they're doing an interview with their potential boss, when you're with someone who's you're inspired by or higher status or an influence position, how do you not be insecure or nervous?
Okay, one simple answer. I mean, there might be exceptions, but it's pretty simple. Do your homework. Be prepared. So if you go into an interview, you're naturally nervous. But you prepare you research that person, you know who they are, you know what the company is like, you know what the position is, why the other person was fired, what they're going to need from you. You're going to feel a lot less insecure than if you just kind of go in and wing it, right? Okay. So if you're on any kind of project, I talked in the War book about Alfred Hitchcock, the film director. And my wife is a film director. It's a nerve-wracking task. You've got an army of 80 people who are all and insecure and ego-ridden, etc. They're all secretly hoping you fail.
So they can be the director,
Okay, it's a nightmare, right? And Hitchcock, people were astonished. She'd be on the set, she'd be falling asleep. Oh, really? Okay, yeah, go ahead. He was like Buddha. He didn't care. He was never upset or anything. People, how could that be? Directors are the most nervous and bitter people. They're so control freaks. It's because he prepared. every detail he knew beforehand. He knew every shot that he wanted, what the clothes looked like, what the colors, how the frame would be. He storyboarded it in exact detail. And he said that by the time the film was being shot, I was bored because I knew everything how it was supposed to be. So he could be calm because he was so well prepared. So if you do your homework, it's maybe not going to get rid of all your insecurities and all your nervousness, because the degree of nervousness is okay, because you have to understand the physiology. Adrenaline is a very powerful emotion, and feeling a little bit of doubt and a little bit of fear will drive you and keep you awake and alert. So you don't want to be so confident that you'll just do anything. You want a little bit of tenseness.
Yeah.
But if you prepare and you've anticipated the situation, it will get rid of 80% of those doubts that you have.
We were talking about before, and I have a couple final questions for you. We were talking about before self-doubt, before we started recording. And I'm curious your thoughts on doubt, doubting ourselves, and how do we train our minds or our bodies or our life so that doubt doesn't keep us from accomplishing what we want or keep us from trying something we want. I think a lot of people don't do something because they doubt themselves so much from the fear of failure or the fear of success or people judging them. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, the main thing is you have to try something, you have to do something, right? And of course, if you're full of doubt and insecurities, it's going to be very hard. And so, what separates the person who is going to learn on the way to success from somebody who won't will be that person who's 22, 23. They tries it, they do it, they take that job and they write that thing or they do that whatever it is that the other person maybe wouldn't try because they're not afraid of failing, right? So a certain level of, you can't control that because some people are born that way. And if they're born that way, there's something about them in their DNA that is given them that drive.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that drive, if you have your insecurities, understand pain is a very powerful motivating factor. But if you're 22 and you don't try something, you don't feel the pain. So why not? And then you're 23, then you're 24, you're not feeling good. And you're 28, you're still not feeling good. And you're 32, you're starting to feel a little depressed. And you're 35, and you're 40, you're picking up the bottle, etc. Okay, so understand you're 22 that life is very difficult, and that you're down a path towards something really, really bad unless you get your act together and try that first thing. Because what happens, people have studied fear, and it's very important. I know back in 2001, I was in Vienna, Austria, and I was in a theater. I was in the middle of this very packed audience, and there was a fire, and people were panicking and running, and I got such a sense of claustrophobia. I was like, ah. And from then on, I couldn't get on an airplane. I couldn't get in an elevator. I was like developing major claustrophobia, right? And then I saw a therapist, and she said, you got to expose yourself. You got to go back in that elevator.
So true.
You got to go back into that airplane. And then you'll realize it's not so bad and you'll get over it. But avoiding it, you'll never get over the fear. So take that first step. Do whatever it is that you thought you couldn't do, and don't be afraid of it, because that is the most important moment in your life. And then you realize it's not so bad. Okay, people are making fun of me, I failed, but they never tried anything. I at least tried, and I have an idea for my next one. It wasn't so bad, you know? But if you never make that first step, I don't care, the wisdom of Solomon won't be able to help you, right? You'll always be stopping before you. So you've got to have the guts to make that first step, and then the doors will open for you.
It's what I'm hearing you say is it's an experiential event. It's not a theory of, okay, let me think my way out of the fear or the insecurity or the doubt. It's like, no, I have to practice this and experience the feeling of, I failed, or someone laughed at me, or I tripped and fell, whatever it is. You've got to experience it.
You have a good way of summarizing what I'm saying, because you said it better than I did.
Well, this is something I've been fascinated by because I think so many people doubt themselves, and their doubt is what keeps them from going after what they want, getting into the relationship they want, getting out of the relationship they want, getting the job, all these things. And they're afraid of failure, they're afraid of success, and they're afraid of people's opinions or judgment when they take this action. And I I tell people that the simplest thing you can do is write a list of your biggest fears and insecurities. Circle the top one, the one that scares you the most, and then do that until you feel at peace with it, or at least you can embrace it. Essentially become Batman of that fear, right? And live with the bats of that fear, that insecurity, where then it becomes a powerful thing for you. And this is what I did in my teens and 20s, from being terrified of public speaking. And I went to public speaking class every single week until I felt like, wow, I feel powerful up here, not powerless.
Right.
And I did it with so many different things that I was insecure about until they became skills as opposed to fears and insecurities. And so I love that you said you've got to expose yourself to the fear. You've got to re-go into the elevator or go back to that theater that had a fire and breathe and feel comfortable so you can live your life.
And then we go back to that thought about, that question, could it have been worse?
Yeah.
Well, think of it this way. If you don't try that thing, it's going to be a lot worse for you down the road. You can never get anywhere. And you're going to, the pain will be intense in 15 years. You're not feeling it now, but have that hindsight to realize that the worst thing in life, the worst feeling of all, is the feeling you wasted your potential. Oof. That you had dreams and you never even tried them. And then you're in your 50s or 60s, you're facing death. Why was I alive? I didn't do it. I could have done this, that, or that. Never even tried. Remind yourself of that. They used to have emperors in ancient Rome would have a slave walking by them and whispering into their ear, "You're going to die, you're mortal. You might die tomorrow. You might die tomorrow." Right? And that was like a reminder of their mortality, and that they had to not get so.
Wasn't that a story from Marcus Aurelius where he had someone talk to him and say, "You're just a man," or something? Or was that who it was? I can't remember. But someone had someone just say every day, "You're just a man."
Right.
The more powerful he became,
yeah,
to kind of keep him more grounded. Right. You're just a man, or you're going to die.
Or just have that whisper, "You're going to fail. You're not going to realize your dreams. You're going to waste your life. You're wasting your life. You're wasting your life. You're wasting your life." You don't want to feel that way. I know, like, it's hard. I'm coming from a position of privilege, and I don't deny that.
Sure.
But I didn't have anybody help me. All my success was pretty much on my own. I worked really hard. But I can tell you this, that prior to my success, I was really unhappy. I was really unhappy. I was very depressed. I even had moments I was suicidal. I felt like I could do something, but I wasn't able to do it. And then the ability to write my books now, I don't have that feeling anymore. And it's the greatest thing in the world to not ever feel like, that doubt and that depression. It's like a constant exhilaration.
It's amazing.
I finished it. I wrote that book. I did it. I can feel good about myself. And I want other people to understand that. You may not, it doesn't have to be a grand project, but it has to be something that makes you feel like, because when you're a child, you have these dreams. Everybody has these dreams. You're going to be the best basketball player in history, like me. Like I thought, right? The Jewish kid's going to be a great basketball player. Okay, or I'm going to be the best. This, I'm going to be a great writer. I'm going to be that. Blah. And then you get older and you lose those dreams, and it's very depressing. It's very debilitating. And you want to keep some of that child within you alive, and some of that ambition, some of that desire to achieve something great. And having ambition is not a bad thing. It's a dirty word today because people think it means you're selfish.
Yeah.
But your ambitions can be towards achieving things that help people as well.
What's the greatest fear for you now that you haven't yet conquered or overcome, or insecurity that you're still dealing with?
I don't know, Louis. I haven't, believe it or not, a tremendous fear of failure.
Still, after all these massive hits and millions of books sold, and every time you get
I'm neurotic, I don't deny it.
Every book is a hit and just changes lives.
Well, it's because, I don't know if it's from my background, I come home with straight A's and my parents would go, okay, so what? What's next? Okay, so it's instilled in me some way, I don't know why, but so I'm writing my new book, my first chapter, and I'm like, this isn't working. It's too intellectual, it's not gonna hit people, it's not relevant to their lives. I have to change it, I write this book like this, people are going to laugh at me. And I go through that every single time in every single book. Now I'm able, it's kind of a split personality because in the back of my mind, I know I'm kind of playing a game, but I still play the game. And it keeps me motivated, it keeps me working. So I must say, I'm still deathly afraid of failing my readers and of them being disappointed in me going, I thought Robert was this great writer. And look, he's put out this, what's wrong with him? He's getting old and soft. I'm still afraid of that.
Wow. Well, I guess that's why you keep showing up, keep creating
Yeah.
to help you overcome that.
I keep back and body back to
That's it. That's it. This has been powerful, and I think a lot of people are going to love this. I want them to, if you're listening right now and something inspired you or you're watching, make sure to send a tweet to Robert Greene. Let him know what you enjoyed about this, or on Instagram, Robert Greene Official. Post a story, tag Robert so you can see it, even though I'm not sure how active you are on Instagram. But someone's watching there, so you'll get the information and the laws of human nature on Facebook. If you don't have all of Robert's books, make sure to get them right now, and also get on your newsletter. I think you have a newsletter, right, where they can opt in for when the future book comes out. I'm not sure if Ryan probably manages a lot for you still, but go to your website, which is
PowerSeductionAndWar.com.
PowerSeductionAndWar.com.
The and is spelled out.
AndWar.com. Go there, get on his newsletter, or just go check it every month, because the book's coming out hopefully in the next couple of years. But this is going to be your best book yet. I'm already declaring it.
I hope so.
I'm declaring it because I know you're not going to let yourself down, or people who read it down. You're that neurotic.
I am that neurotic.
You're that neurotic.
I sure as hell am, and I don't deny it.
You've got some other interviews we've had on our show. We'll link those up in the show notes if you want to hear Robert's definition of greatness and his 3 truths. You can go listen to those. Final question for you. What's the question you wish more people would ask you that they don't ask you?
I don't really have, when people put you on the spot like that, you have to be like so quick-witted. I'm kind of a slow brain.
Is there anything you wish more people would have discussions about that they don't with you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of really into the zeitgeist. I wrote a chapter about that in Human Nature, about the times that we're living through. People tend to think that I'm just interested in individuals and psychology now, but I'm also very interested in our culture, in our society, and how it fits into the larger scheme of history. So sometimes people don't ask me so much about that chapter and about what do you think is going on right now in the world today? Where are we? What is the moment that we're in? And how does it compare in the past? Because I read a lot of history. I'm not bragging because it probably led to my stroke, to be honest with you.
And like instantly sucked all the moisture out of my mouth.
And so I have this innate sense of patterns of history, of things that repeat, of things, people go through certain crises. And so it makes me very attuned to the spirit, to the feeling in the air now. So,
What do you think is going to happen in the next few years based on history in 2 minutes? The overview of what you've experienced from all the historical events to what we're facing now.
Well, I think the human spirit can't deal with too much stagnation. So on the one hand, we're afraid of change. On the other hand, we're deadly afraid of boredom and stagnation. And things have been stagnant for too long. And we're on the verge of what I think could be a revolutionary generation. It's not carved in stone, because social media has kind of disrupted the apple cart, so to speak. But young people are the motors of change in this world. They will create culture. They will create new movements. They will keep the world alive, because they enter the world, and the world doesn't fit who they are because it was created by boomers or whomever. So they want to mold the world into something that's more like them. So they're the motors of all the changes, all the trends in fashion, all the trends in the arts, in politics, etc. Things have been too static for a long time. We live in a situation where the politics and the structures have not really shifted in 50 years. They're ossified. And so I think the human spirit is sick of it. If I were 20 years old, I would be sick of it. I would say, this is not the world that I want to live in. And so I feel like there's going to be an outbreak at some point where people are going to say, I want to live. I want something more alive. I don't want this world that is so unequal. I'm somebody who rants against inequalities of wealth, etc. And just the kind of rigid social frame that we're living in, I think there will be an outburst. I'm not Nostradamus, so I could be wrong. In 5 years, people might be laughing at me. But I sense, and other people who write about the generational phenomenon say that the millennials were the crisis generation, and that's always followed by the revolutionary generation, which would be the Generation Y, or whatever you call them.
Wow.
Or Z, Generation Z.
How should we be preparing ourselves if this comes true? What can we do now for the next couple of years to prepare ourselves?
Well, embrace it. Embrace it. I did a podcast about it, and a lot of people were upset, going, well, revolutions, I mean, come on. Look at the Soviet Union or Communist China. Revolutions are bad, they're ugly, look at that. And my response is, change is the healthiest thing that can happen, right? Even if it's a change for the worst, it's okay, because humans need a vitality. We need things that are different. We need a different landscape, social landscape around us, right? So welcome it. Don't be a defensive little rat who's got to live in their own little hole, and everything has to be the same. The world is changing. It will change without whether you like it or not. Technology will change your world whether you like it or not. Young people will change the world whether you like it or not. It's a lot better to embrace it and feel excited about the opportunities that are coming out. Because if you look at just take it from the business point of view, it's devastated. It's like a hurricane happening. All the businesses that are gone, the
Jobs lost,
entertainment industry,
yeah.
the travel industry, they're devastated.
Gone. Restaurant industry, yeah.
What happens when that? New things are going to spring up. New ideas are going to spring up. There's going to be new ways. I think the future for that kind of world is going to be giving people experiences, because they've been locked up in their house for a year, and they want, so like you go to a hotel or a restaurant, you want to give people a little bit of an experience. It's not just something so flat and like on social media, so people feel more alive. There's going to be opportunities you're not even aware of. So be open to the change and be excited about it. That's the main thing to prepare yourself for.
Robert, thank you for always opening up and being honest and real every time you come on. Thanks for being episode 1 and now 1,000 something. Hope you come back on many other times.
2,000.
2,000, yeah. Hopefully we'll come back on before that. But your next book we'll have you back on for sure.
Okay.
If you guys want to hear more about Robert's ideas on the zeitgeist and what's happening in culture, then let me know, and maybe we'll bring you back on sooner in the next 6 months after the election and everything to see what do you think is going to be happening moving forward, what we can do about it. So, Robert, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
If you want to learn more about how to master your mind, check out this next video right here.
So when people begin to disengage and get beyond themselves, you are
And I want to read
Hey, Mary.
a passage from one of his lectures, which I think is one of the greatest things he ever wrote, and which has been a very marvelous thing for me. It was in a lecture delivered to a group of clergy in Switzerland a considerable number of years ago. And he writes as follows. People forget that even doctors have moral scruples, and that certain patients' confessions are hard even for a doctor to swallow. Yet the patient does not feel himself accepted, unless the very worst in him is accepted too. No one can bring this about by mere words. It comes only through reflection, and through the doctor's attitude towards himself and his own dark side. If the doctor wants to guide another, or even accompany him a step of the way, he must feel with that person's psyche. He never feels it when he passes judgment. Whether he puts his judgments into words or keeps them to himself makes not the slightest difference. To take the opposite position and to agree with the patient offhand is also of no use. Feeling comes only through unprejudiced objectivity. This sounds almost like a scientific precept, and it could be confused with a purely intellectual, abstract attitude of mind. But what I mean is something quite different. It is a human quality, a kind of deep respect for the facts, for the man who suffers from them, and for the riddle of such a man's life. The truly religious person has this attitude. He knows that God has brought all sorts of strange and inconceivable things to pass, and seeks in the most curious ways to enter a man's heart. He therefore senses in everything the unseen presence of the divine will. This is what I mean by unprejudiced objectivity. It is a moral achievement on the part of the doctor, who ought not to let himself be repelled by sickness and corruption. We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. And I am the oppressor of the person I condemn, not his friend and fellow sufferer. I do not in the least mean to say that we must never pass judgment when we desire to help and improve. But if the doctor wishes to help a human being, he must be able to accept him as he is. And he can do this in reality only when he has already seen and accepted himself as he is. Perhaps this sounds very simple, but simple things are always the most difficult. In actual life, it requires the greatest art to be simple, and so acceptance of oneself is the essence of the moral problem and the acid test of one's whole outlook on life. That I feed the beggar, that I forgive an insult, that I love my enemy in the name of Christ, all these are undoubtedly great virtues. What I do unto the least of my brethren, that I do unto Christ. But what if I should discover that the least amongst them all, the poorest of all beggars, the most impudent of all offenders, yea, the very fiend himself, that these are within me, and that I myself stand in need of the alms of my own kindness, that I myself am the enemy who must be loved, what then? Then, as a rule, the whole truth of Christianity is reversed. There is then no more talk of love and long-suffering. We say to the brother within us, Raka, and condemn and rage against ourselves. We hide him from the world. We deny ever having met this least among the lowly in ourselves, and had it been God himself who drew near to us in this despicable form, we should have denied him 1,000 times before a single cock had crowed. Healing may be called, Jung says, a religious problem. In the sphere of social or national relations, the state of suffering may be civil war, and this state is to be cured by the Christian virtue of forgiveness and love of one's enemies. That which we recommend with the conviction of good Christians is applicable to external situations. We must also apply inwardly in the treatment of neurosis. This is why modern man has heard enough about guilt and sin. He is sorely beset by his own bad conscience, and wants rather to know how he is to reconcile himself with his own nature, how he is to love the enemy in his own heart, and call the wolf his brother. The modern man does not want to know in what way he can imitate Christ, but in what way he can live his own individual life, however meager and uninteresting it may be. It is because every form of imitation seems to him deadening and sterile that he rebels against the force of tradition that would hold him to well-trodden ways. All such roads for him lead in the wrong direction. He may not know it, but he behaves as if his own individual life were God's special will which must be fulfilled at all costs. This is the source of his egoism, which is one of the most tangible evils of the neurotic state. But the person who tells him he is too egoistic has already lost his confidence, and rightly so, for that person has driven him still further into his neurosis. If I wish to effect a cure for my patients, I am forced to acknowledge the deep significance of their egoism. I should be blind indeed if I did not recognize it as a true will of God. I must even help the patient to prevail in his egoism. If he succeeds in this, he estranges himself from other people. He drives them away, and they come to themselves as they should, for they were seeking to rob him of his sacred egoism. This must be left to him, for it is his strongest and healthiest power. It is, as I have said, a true will of God, which sometimes drives him into complete isolation. However wretched this state may be, it also stands him in good stead. For in this way alone can he get to know himself and learn what an invaluable treasure is the love of his fellow beings. It is, moreover, only in the state of complete abandonment and loneliness that we experience the helpful powers of our own natures. When one has several times seen this development at work, one can no longer deny that what was evil has turned good, and that what seemed good has kept alive the forces of evil. The archdemon of egoism leads us along the royal road to that ingathering which religious experience demands. What we observe here is a fundamental law of life, enantiodromia, or conversion into the opposite. And it is this that makes possible the reunion of the warring halves of the personality, and thereby brings the civil war to an end. End of quote.
Selling cars 100% online wouldn't work, but we went to work.
The following is a conversation with Eric Weinstein, the third time we've spoken on this podcast. He is the wise turtle, Master Oogway to my Kung Fu Panda, one of my favorite people to talk to in this world. Complicated and fascinating mind that I'm grateful to have the chance to accompany in exploring this world through conversation. On this podcast and on his, the latter called The Portal. Quick mention of each sponsor, followed by some thoughts related to the episode. First is Grammarly, a service I use in my writing, check spelling, grammar, sentence structure, and readability. Second is Sunbasket, a meal delivery service I use to add healthy variety into my culinary life. Third is SEMrush, the most advanced SEO optimization tool I've ever come across. I don't like looking at numbers, but somebody should. It helps you make good decisions. And finally, ExpressVPN, the VPN I've used for many years to protect my privacy on the internet. Please check out these sponsors in the description to get a discount and to support this podcast. As a side note, let me say that wherever this life takes me, I'm drawn to the possibility of having many more conversations with Eric through the years. I think we have just the right kind of contrasting worldviews and a deep respect and appreciation of each other's life stories that creates for this magical experience in the realm of conversation that feels like we're always looking for something that we never quite find, but are always better for having tried. I'm not sure how or why the universe has connected Eric and me, but it did. And I would be a fool not to trust his judgment and enjoy the journey. If somehow you like this podcast, please subscribe on YouTube, review it with stars on Apple Podcasts, follow on Spotify, support it on Patreon, connect with me on Twitter at Lex Friedman. And now, here's my conversation with Eric Weinstein. Who's the greatest musician of all time, would you say? We were just off camera talking about Eddie Van Halen. He unfortunately passed away.
Who's the greatest musician of all time?
Yeah.
Jonathan Richman.
Who's that?
It's a weird question, so I'm going to give you a weird answer. It's not because...
Thank you.
Okay. Jonathan Richman, the reason I'm picking on him is that he had a quote. He was the front man of a group called the Modern Lovers. And his quote was something like, we have to be prepared to play music when our instruments are broken, electricity's out, and it's raining, something like that. And I thought that quote was very interesting because what it said was, you have to be able to strip this thing down farther and farther back to get to something that is intrinsically musical. So we were having a conversation just now about virtuosity. We're talking about Eddie Van Halen and his recent passing. And that affected me emotionally. I don't know whether it affected you. I was never a Van Halen, the group, fan. But I revered Eddie Van Halen's capacity for innovation. I saw him like, Rodney Mullen, the skateboarder. I dreamed of having the two of them on the same podcast just to talk about what it's like to totally discontinuously innovate.
And you posted a video of Spanish Fly, I think, and saying like, I didn't know the guitar could make those kinds of sounds. Like, what is this voodoo magic?
Well, this is the thing, right? The arpeggios that he did on a single string are so fast, and the attacks from the hammer-ons, when they go at light speed as he did, particularly, and the reason I chose that was that I wanted to strip out the electronics, because part of the claim will be is that he's a rock musician, and a lot of the innovations had to do with things peculiar to sort of the electrified setup, his use of the whammy bar, for example, or the Frankenstrat that he built from different pieces, right? All of those aspects, in my opinion, are just dwarfed by his innovation and his musicianship. And that's why I chose Spanish Fly, because everyone, of course, will go to something like Eruption or Running with the Devil, which is the first things that they heard that let them know that there was a new force erupting out of Southern California. That was Eddie Van Halen, right? I mean, I'm in love with the story of it.
You're often so poetic about music. Like, it clearly touches your soul on some kind of, on many levels. What is that? Is it deeper than just rocking out with the in your convertible Corvette, 69. I imagine Eric Weinstein just driving down the California highways, blasting some kind of music. Is it just like being able to be carefree for moments of time, or is there something more fundamental that connects to like the theory of everything, and physics and life and all of that?
How often do you have the chance, for example, to hear mathematics perform as you do in Bach, right? Like something with that kind of precision and elegance that can't really be grasped. Where, to go back to Leonard Cohen's famous line, the baffled king composing, right?
Such a good song.
It's such a good song, but it's also like individual verses of that song are insanely important. The baffled king is how we often make music. We don't really understand what did we just do that broke that person's heart sitting on a couch, right? And so it's a very strange thing that you should be able to have. Think of it like you're a computer. You've got this weird open music port, port 37.8. Like it's not even supposed to be there, and suddenly somebody starts playing guitar and they're making you feel things, or like in particular instruments like the violin. It's so difficult. It's so unforgiving. And when it gives up its secrets, it just, it wraps its fingers around your heart and won't let go. Sometimes I talk about head, heart, and loins. When something can grab your head, heart, and your loins at the same moment and integrate them, there are very few opportunities to live like that. And if you think about Eddie Van Halen, as far as your head, the musical innovations and the fact that he was drawing directly from the classical canon, really speaks to the idea that maybe rock is what somebody like Jimi Hendrix saw it as being, an infinitely extensible medium. In terms of heart, I always notice the smile on his face. It's painful to look at an Eddie Van Halen solo now. Like sometimes you see the cigarette dripping off the side of his mouth, and you're like, that's gonna fucking kill you. And I'm not even worried about it for you. I'm worried about it for me. You're gonna rob. I don't even need to hear you play another note. I just like knowing that you're in the world, that there is somebody that everyone looks to. But I've never heard a guitarist say, I don't know. I think he was okay. Like I've never heard it. You can hate him, but you still think he was a genius. There are very few people like that in the world. And then loins, those leaps. That guy was incredibly good looking. Skin tight pants, super athleticism. Yeah. He completely owned the male sexuality of the stage, both being the completely dominant, sort of mythical alpha male. I hate that expression, but there you are. But also this kind of little boy with this mischievous smirk, and the sense that it all came together. How could you not eat that up?
You could just imagine the millions of like young teenage boys who are just like playing air guitar in their room, just that, basically dreaming of being that kind of god, the most perfect example of what a human being can be. It's fascinating to think.
It is, and then as in many of the cases with these bands, you get these multiple talents in the same outfit, and I think that the original configuration with David Lee Roth, David Lee Roth is such a hot mess at all times.
I would love you to talk to David Lee Roth. Like if they that dance would be just gorgeous.
I don't know.
Can you handle it? Can you ride that?
Probably not. Yeah, probably not, because I think he's I get the feeling that he's very smart and very dysregulated, and I don't know that I could
bring him down to earth for a moment.
Well, I can also get pretty dysregulated,
Yeah.
And so I don't know whether it could be magic, it could be a shit show. I don't know what you thought of his appearance on Rogan. That was interesting.
I loved it, but Joe does this sometimes. Sometimes he just sits back and listens, and he just lets the music play, which works really well. I think you have a chance to kind of jump into the chaos, and then you'll just start, and the places you'll go, you may not even talk about music for like hours. You might just go to this, because he, I think, lives in Japan. Like there's a weird,
he's been in like an EMT after he was a rock star. He chose to become I don't know, it like
there's depth to that man that that hasn't been explored by him either. So that'll be an exciting conversation. Can we go back to Leonard Cohen?
Yeah.
Can we just the things I feel when I listen to Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen or anything by him really, but that one.
You want to get it?
Let's go. What does it that song mean to you? Is it love?
Oh boy. Well, first of all, it's mystery. Like it starts off about mystery. So what are you doing? You're doing this alternation between the two chords, so 3 notes at the same time. One is called the tonic, or you have the major and the relative minor. He's alternating between. There's only 1 note of difference between those 2 chords. One of them would be feeling sad, one of them would be more joyous, typically described. And so by altering 1 note, it's the minimal amount to take you back and forth between joy and happiness, as that's encoded in this. So he starts off with that. I heard there was David played the Please the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do you? That's really interesting because he's using this technique called bathos, right? So the alternation between the sublime and kind of the guttural or ridiculous or the mundane, right? So he's like,
there's a bitterness to it too. Is it just play?
Well, the way I hear it, again, great song allows for different interpretations. You happen to be asking me, so I'm going to impart some stuff that probably isn't in the song, but why it speaks to me, that's what makes it great. Yeah. The way I hear it is he doesn't believe the audience. You don't really care for music, do you? Then what are you doing listening to this, stupid idiots? Yeah. Of course you care for music. You're too cool to care. So I see through you and screw you. That's like that's the energy I get. Then he does this weird thing. It goes like this is where he should put the description of where he is in the chord progression, which is the tonic, right? It goes like this. And then he hits the 4th and the 5th, which are the 2 other major elements, the subdominant and the dominant, in functional harmony. So he's describing the chord progression in real time in the lyrics. There's 2 ways this can come about in other songs. Like we had this example of Every Time We Say Goodbye. Do you know the song? Yeah, every time we say goodbye. No, I think it was a Cole Porter, maybe. Gershwin, maybe Porter, I don't know. I cry a little. There is no love song finer, but how strange the change from major to minor. Right, like it's beautiful uses. Then there's times when it's duplicitous. So, for example, you'll have. I guess my favorite examples of this are Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire. I fell into a burning ring of fire. And what does he do with the lyrics of the tune? I went down, down, down. He goes up. Yeah, right? And so the idea is like, oh, okay, that was a head fake. Yeah, right? And another one of these, is Nina Simone's Feeling Good. Well, okay, so what do you get at? Birds flying high. You know how I feel. And sun up in the sky. You know how I feel.
That woman's voice.
She
doesn't give a damn yet.
And I feel it. But then what's the da-dum, da-dum? Yeah. It's like heavy stripping music. You're not in a good place. You're probably in some strip club with lots of your money. You're drinking lousy beer, some bad situation. Yeah. And she's feeling good? No, it's funereal. It's oppressive, right?
I never thought of that song that way. Wow.
Well, you think of it as joyous?
Yeah.
No. If you think about it, contrast it with Ray Charles, for example. Do you know Lonely Avenue? Well, my room has got 2 windows, but the sunshine never comes through. It's really depressed. It's the same sort of vibe as Nina. There's 2 genius intellectual concepts behind music, one of which is the wave equation. Usually we solve it for a one-dimensional medium because we're talking about strings or air columns. Occasionally you're talking about things like hand pans or steel drums or metallophones or gamelons, whatever. And those have a wave equation too that's much more chaotic. The other equation is this crazy thing that 2 to the 19/12 is almost exactly equal to 3, which is what gave us even temperament. And so the tension between those 2 things is in fact one of these most beautiful stories inside of that system, that formula. of the baffled king is a discovery. He's not really composing it. The reason he's baffled is, imagine that you took like a little brush and you started brushing off, a pyramid under the sand. You might think that you created the pyramid by your brushing, but in fact, if somebody else did it, that's why you're baffled, right?
It's beautifully put, you're right. And it's as creating one of the greatest songs of all time, and as he's doing it, he's baffled.
And he's
Leonard within the song.
Leonard is baffled, my contention, but he knows enough to know that he's baffled, right? And so the idea is that he is composing. He has the audacity to compose as David. He's echoing David at a minimum. And then in a later song, which I really wish we would discuss, that's totally dystopic, and you will not like it at all, is The Future, which contains this line that I think I used in my episode with Roger Penrose on The Portal. The subtle plug. The Portal. Yes. I'm the little Jew that wrote the Bible. So there is this way in which Leonard Cohen, I think, is constantly coming to the idea of being a biblical-like scribe. And I think this is one of the great things that, you see Dylan doing this with All Along the Watchtower. You saw Warren Zevon, who we should talk much more about, doing this with a song called I Was in the House When the House Burned Down. Do you know this?
No, this is embarrassing.
Sweetheart. This is a great thing.
Darling.
Warren Zevon is one of the most important songwriters of our time. And he's been largely forgotten by this generation. But, Bob Dylan would sing one of his songs in tribute. I've heard Bob Dylan, very small number of songwriters really move him. Woody Guthrie, Gordon Lightfoot, and Warren Zevon. By the way, Bob Dylan, if you're out there, appear on either one of our podcasts. We need to get your voice into a new medium for a new group.
Definitely.
This is a time for Bob Dylan, my friend. Honestly, you've been doing an amazing job in this space. One of the reasons I'm super excited to do this podcast again is that I've learned some things about what I don't do well. And I also have sort of struggled with the question, should I do those things better? Because what if it's, I always use the same example of the fitted sheet. When you're trying to put a queen-size fitted sheet on a king-size mattress, it's like, okay, I got that corner squared away. Then you get another corner that pops off, and then you go back around. I wonder whether I can improve my style in the ways in which, I think it was just a recognition of the difference. You do a better job of getting to the soul of a really top intellectual guest and making them accessible and presenting them as themselves for a huge number of people. And I give my eye to be able to do that.
Do you ever think about this? Like, because I think about what is the greatest conversation I'll ever have. Like in a sense, The Portal, not to reduce it to anything, but it will be the greatest conversation. You may have already had it, but it's very possible if enough people like me can keep twisting your arm to keep doing The Portal, please. But there'll be an amazing conversation. One of the questions that I ask myself is like, who is the person that I'm especially equipped? For some reason, I'm convinced I'm Putin. There's something in my head that says I can do this man better than anyone else in this world. I got this thought in my head about it. I don't know why. And I'm convinced, but I think the universe works in that way. Like if it tells you it's going to happen.
The way I would say it is that almost everybody who becomes a Supreme Court justice believes at a very early age they're going to become a Supreme Court justice. Many people believe at an early age that they can do it, don't get there. But of those who get there, almost all of them had this sort of, well, I call it pathological self-confidence. And I do think you have pathological self-confidence, and you also have humility. And most people would hear those as a contradiction. I think that you would not be able to get away with what you do if you didn't have the humility. And so I think, the great danger is that your equation becomes unbalanced, that you either lose the humility or you lose the humility overwhelms the ego and the drive, because right now you've got a Mexican standoff in your mind, and the rest of us are just benefit. That's beautifully put. My Mexican standoffs aren't as stable as yours. All Reservoir Dogs all the time.
Yeah.
But actually, the person who that describes is Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel thinks more different. People always say, like, what does Peter think about X, Y, and Z, P, and Q? It's like, well, do you want communist Peter? Do you want hyper-capitalist Peter?
Minds in there.
Oh my God, right? On everything. That's why he's successful, is that he's got all these minds fighting each other. And so when people say Peter is this or Peter is that, I just laugh. Because like nobody who knows him would describe him as having thoughts at the level that people are claiming. And I do think that, in my case, there's also pathological epistemic humility. Like, just I know how little I can do in one life. I know how many things I've screwed up. I know how many things I've got wrong. And on the other hand, I know that if not, it's like Hillel's questions. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? And if I'm only for myself, what am I? If not now, when? At some level, there's a question about if I don't decide that someone is capable and that somebody is me, and if I apply that to everyone else on the planet, then nobody's going to do anything. And so I do think that one of the things that people like you and I get is, who are you to say that? F that, man. Just sign me up for some Dunning-Kruger.
Yeah, but it's multiple minds, like you said. Like this morning, I was feeling so good and confident. But I couldn't think no wrong. And I remember last night clearly thinking that I'm the dumbest human who's ever lived.
Yeah,
and nothing I've ever said is worth anything. What the fuck am I doing with my life? Why am I scared? And I was terrified of this conversation. Who the hell am I?
Conversation?
Because I'm an idiot. And because, but no. But this morning, I was the baddest motherfucker who's ever walked this earth. So I was very conscious. I think it was the coffee. I'm not sure. Maybe sleep.
This sounds very Russian, and it involves multiple beverages, some of them being alcoholic, others containing caffeine.
There's, in fact, I can't share the story behind it, but there is a bottle of vodka in the fridge.
Okay.
So,
I should use you for coffee. This is a morning show here.
So I put out a call that we get a chance to have this conversation, and people ask these wonderful questions. A few people ask about depression and suicide. This is a Russian program, so we have to go there. And I think about Leonard Cohen, and one of the things that always kind of broke my heart and kind of suffocated the hope I have for just, I don't know, for love in a person's life, is to hear how much depression was a part of Leonard Cohen's life and how much he suffered. See, I guess one way, I'm not sure where we can go with this question, but do you think about the places that the mind can go, like these dark places?
Yeah.
Is there something like where the only escape out is suicide, for example? That's the darkest version of it?
That, I really think suicide is a big place, and suicidal ideation and self-harm, and we don't talk a lot about it. It's a similar problem to trying to talk about trans. These are umbrella categories, and if the commonality is that somebody harms themselves, but we don't know whether that's coming because of a problem in brain chemistry, because of an event in their life, whether evolutionary programming for suicide is weirdly normal, whether or not it might have a religious motivation. There's too many different forms of self-harm. It's something like the 10th largest killer, thereabouts. And I think that, you can look at it from different angles. I'm old enough to have, had Pete Seeger come to my college when I was at university, and to watch his good humor in the face of all adversity. I think of Odetta. I used to go to Odetta concerts. I don't know if you know who she is. Okay, this is going to be one of the better days of your life. Check out Odetta when we're done with the interview. She was a civil rights figure, but also just had a profound voice and great musicianship. These people were in the struggle, right? And they saw lots of bad things happen, and they kept their humor about it. And the thing is that you can take on the Weltschmerz, the pain of the planet, or you can try to do something else, which is to be a happy warrior, even if the odds are terrible and the cost of failure is catastrophic.
So even when surrounded by darkness. But the thing is with Leonard Cohen is he created such beautiful music, and yet it's like Anthony Bourdain, the same, and yet they go to this dark place. And it's easy to say it's just biochemistry.
No, there's a linkage between this highly generative, creative side, and in some cases, dark depression. In other cases, not. So you can't say that it's tied, that genius and madness are always, co-traveling, or that beauty and pain are one and the same. What you can say is that there's a cluster of people that tell you that for that cluster, there is a relationship between the darkness and the beauty. And I do think that in part, it's squaring circles that can't be squared. We were just talking before about the inability to serve two perfect systems, the perfect system of the wave equation and the perfect system of even temperament. They're both perfect, they're not compatible. And once you realize that there's perfection and an inability to make contact with perfection, I think, you recognize that there is no solution to this world.
Yeah. That's weird with the poets and musicians. Do you want to say this is a particular thing that you do, but then there's Spanish Fly by Van Halen. And then you realize, oh.
Well, what do you get out of Spanish Fly by Van Halen? I think it's very singular because of the fact that it's purely acoustic.
For some reason, I couldn't imagine Eddie Van Halen separate from the band in front of thousands of people just screaming and rocking out with lights everywhere. And Spanish Fly made me think it made me imagine him sitting alone on a couch in a room.
I think that's who he was. I really do. I believe me, I get it. He was a rock star. It's a rock guy. Got it. I'm almost positive that you can't get to where he got to without being a complete introvert.
Yeah, it made me imagine that there's some half-naked supermodel walking around hoping that they can, do their thing together, and Eddie's completely disinterested. He'd be with the guitar.
He'd be with the guitar, right?
Yeah.
Because, honestly, at some level, in one case, maybe you're conquesting, maybe you're pursuing love and romance. In the other case, you're talking about a relationship to the order, the creator, the almighty, whatever it is you want to call that substrate that is reality. And, do I believe that Eddie Van Halen and Jimi Hendrix and Paganini and Heifetz jacked into the true essence of the world? Yeah, they did. I don't think it's as good as differential geometry. I'm sorry. I do think it's amazing for other reasons. And thank God, because it's very difficult to communicate differential geometry at scale. But the thing about eruption, for example, what level do you want to come into eruption? Do you want just the sheer majesty and pageantry? Do you want the theatrics? You could put him on wires and, set his pants on fire or whatever. It'd be totally in keeping with it. On the other hand, you want to talk something completely precise that, shows off the virtuosity of what's possible with the Stratocaster. Everything works. Multi-axis.
But there's a precision to it, which is very different than Hendrix. There's a messiness to Hendrix that, to me, somebody who has OCD has always been
How does
a
Hendrix
struggle.
affect you? I mean, let's have the Jimi Hendrix conversation. I don't know that we can do anything to it that hasn't already been done to it. Maybe that's not true. Maybe the idea is that every generation has to have its Hendrix conversation, and this is a long.
It's Jimi Hendrix experience. Yeah.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
I hear he stole it from Joe Rogan.
Yeah. There's so many details. One, it hurt my soul on so many levels that you can put a thumb over the guitar to play a note, to hold a note. And it doesn't, because I wanted to be the Russian virtuoso that sits with his classical guitar in perfect form, plays really fast with the fingers, And then you want the thumb to be perfectly relaxed and supported.
So that's the Russian conservatory student.
conservative, yeah.
Then there's like the Russian wild man.
Which one is that?
Well,
Having
there are different Russian archetypes, right? So the completely idiosyncratic Russian is very different in a weird way from the, I can do this backwards in any key, in any sleep, in my sleep, and in any time signature that just snap your fingers. We've discussed my piano tuner in previous episodes.
No, that was offline conversation. You told me the story.
But I should tell you the story.
You should retell the story.
There I was in darkest Manhattan.
Yeah.
With the world's shittiest, it wasn't even an upright, it was a spinet piano. A friend had given it to me. The piano fell out of tune, and I would have to tune it. And the only tuner I knew was this Russian guy, and I hated dealing with him. There's something about his attitude that just really rubbed me the wrong way. So anyway, my wife says, tune that thing. So we get the piano tuner to come, and he's tuning this. He's like, are you sure you want to tune this piece of shit? Okay, fine. So he's like, okay, it's your money. The phone rings, and I have the phone ringer set on a landline to Paganini Caprice 24. And immediately as the phone rings, he figures out what key the phone ringer is, which is not the key that like Liszt composed the variations on Caprice 24. And he starts